we're live, and here we are in Senate Institutions. It's May 22nd, 2026. We're here, we're going to be talking about H.294 and relating to telecommunication services and wages in correctional facilities. We have on the agenda today April Feng, and did I pronounce your last name correctly?
That's all right. Yep. Thank you.
He's the CEO of Amelio. We have her on Zoom. And before we have you start, we're going to go around and at least let you know who the senators are that are here. And I'll start to my right.
Senator Major from Windsor.
And John Benson from Orange.
And I'm Rob Plunkett from the Bennington District. I'm the vice chair of the committee. And I understand you have a presentation for us. So the floor is yours and take it away.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm going to share my screen and then walk through a pretty quick presentation, and hopefully we can save time for questions as well.
Great.
So let me share my screen here. All right. So as mentioned, I am the CEO of Amelio. Today, I want to do a quick introduction on Amelio, share a little bit of our mission and impact, and then really highlight on one of our case studies of our work with the Iowa Department of Corrections. Understanding the spirit of the bill, I really want to provide kind of like a snapshot on how we have tried to implement no-cost calls in other states and jurisdictions.
Okay, so you just for a moment, Lindsay, is there a way to turn it up? We have there's like a little fan over here. Oh, and we, so it's a good place to pause because Chair Harrison and Senator Engels just came in, and I'll turn it over to Chair Harrison.
Good.
Literally just
Thank you.
three of us introduced ourselves.
Good, and thanks for waiting for us. All right, so April, that's you, right? Yeah, good.
That's
Hi,
me.
Harrison. I represent the Windsor District, which is the southeast part of the state.
I represent Senator Russ Engels, Essex District.
Good. So you just started the presentation. That's wonderful. Perfect. Yay. Okay. Then let's keep going.
Okay, great. Well, nice meeting both of you. I was just getting started with kind of the purpose of the presentation, and I'm just getting into introducing Amelio. So we are a nonprofit, and we're here for a mission. So we know that the current state of telecommunications in prisons and jails is one that is quite exploitative and blocks a lot of reentry programs and reentry initiatives. And so we're here to address essentially the problem that is faced by a lot of incarcerated individuals and their families. This should not be news to you all, but essentially right now there is a duopoly company that dominates the entire prison and jail communications space. And because of that market structure, they're able to charge families and incarcerated individuals up to the point that they can pay. And a lot of times these accumulates to really high bills for basic things like video calls and voice calls and e-messaging as well. As many states are starting to pay attention to the issue and pass, no-cost call legislation, a lot of folks are discovering the fact that these legislation can put really huge budgetary impact and burden on the state. And so these are things that we have been seeing across the country. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, and Massachusetts actually just passed no-cost call legislation. And so understanding what the state is currently having to take up the cost and pay for those calls is something that is very motivating for me to have this presentation to you all and prove that there is a nonprofit model that can really save money for incarcerated people, their communities, and the state alike. So we are the only nonprofit communication provider in the country. We were started about 6 years ago at the height of COVID as a alternative to Google and Zoom for incarcerated individuals to be utilized in correctional facilities. 6 years afterwards, we're still the only nonprofit. Our hope really at that point was to inspire more organizations who have the access to technology capabilities to get into the space. And so communications for incarcerated people and their families or their resource providers shouldn't be at a high cost, but six years afterwards, we're still here as the only nonprofit. We are going to continue to provide this service for any correctional facility or government agencies that are willing to use Emilio, and then also at no cost to the end users. Our theory of change here is really that when people are able to connect with their loved ones and resource providers when they're still inside, rehabilitation can really start from day one. In that way, they can then re-enter their communities better and their society better and becoming contributing members as well. And so that is our theory of change. I will show a little bit on the impact that we've already seen in some of the states that we serve. But before that, a quick word on where Emilio has been. So since we started in 2019, we have deployed or are actively deploying in 16 states across 63 facilities. And these include adult institutions like state prisons and county jails, also juvenile facilities like juvenile detention centers and then juvenile corrections. So cumulatively, we've served about 196,000 families and incarcerated users, and then breaking down a little bit into incarcerated users versus family users. Going into detail a little bit, so we do serve state DOCs as well as county jails. And I understand that in Vermont, you guys have a unified system. Some of our state partners like Rhode Island has a very similar system. Essentially, state prisons and county jails are both under the DOC. And so we're very familiar with that structure as well. For the 23 state prisons across 4 states that we serve, we mostly provide a pretty comprehensive suite of technologies, including video calls, voice calls, legal counsel, privilege calls, and then also telehealth calls as well. We also provide tablets. These are essentially hardware that are open though. So we want to make sure that whatever aspect of the technology that Emilio provides, we're not trying to lock in the system. So, saying that if you have Emilio tablets, you have to use Emilio Connect or the communication system or vice versa. To us, it's just very important to have good technology infrastructure inside prisons and jails. And so people can access resources as they should. And then also we're scaling in county jails as well. We are in 23 county jails across 4 states as well. And then for county jails, we're mostly providing the learning management system and virtual classrooms. So these are, think about them as like, when I was in college, we were using Canvas as our learning management system. So instructors can upload syllabus onto these LMS and then do asynchronous assignment, grading, and all of those. And so we do provide that for all the county jails that we're serving. And so educators from community colleges, and here in Massachusetts, we have a lot of organizations doing this work for county jails, can actually access services and then have higher frequency interaction with their incarcerated students. And then lastly, we are expanding our work in juvenile facilities as well. In a couple of different states, we're serving either juvenile detention centers on the county level, or we're working with the Department of Juvenile Corrections on the state level to really provide services for committed youths as well. I want to spend the second half of this presentation highlighting our work with Iowa Department of Corrections. So this is something that we've started deploying back in 2021. And so we're just seeing a lot of the impact of Iowa making just video calls at this point free for all the incarcerated individuals. And so I really want to share that impact with you all. After all, we are a nonprofit, and so our funders and our board mostly holds us accountable to the impact that we have, especially with regards to recidivism, better reentry outcomes, and then also safer correctional facilities. And so I do want to share a little bit on our kind of case study in Iowa. So back in 2021, we started providing services to Iowa Department of Corrections. And there are 9 different state prisons, about 9,000 incarcerated individuals in Iowa. And so we started rolling out at the height of COVID Iowa actually shut down all the in-person visits during COVID, and they were looking for a video conferencing solution. At that point, they were actually utilizing Google Meet to make sure that incarcerated folks can connect with their families. I think the state CIO literally Googled, are there any technology solutions that can do video calls for a prison setting? And then Emilio at that point showed up as a very young organization. I think we literally had our initial team rent an Airbnb in Des Moines, Iowa, and stay there for 3 months and launch in every single state facility in Iowa. But fast forward, we're at this point quite a bit bigger, and then learn a lot about what to do and what are the right ways of implementing technology in these facilities. But essentially, we rolled out in 9 different prisons across about 6 months to a year time period. And essentially what we did is providing video calls at no cost to the incarcerated individuals and their families. We also administered the DOC allocated laptops. And so these are computers essentially that can run the software service. And then we also handled basically the in-person visitation scheduling for the DOC. Important to point out here is that Iowa actually never discontinued, right, the contract with their landline calls provider. So even till this day, incarcerated folks in Iowa are still utilizing payphones essentially on the wall that is provided by their current IPCS provider called CoreLink. And so one thing that we do witness, right, is when video calls became free, but landlines are still costing money, people start utilizing more video calls for a very good reason. And so it is something that we're witnessing in Iowa, but I want to make sure that I am clear about the structure on how we are providing services in Iowa. One thing that we did see is once calls become free, there is a decrease in in-prison misconduct. And this is actually something that we are studying with the University of Chicago, Vanderbilt, and UC Berkeley. So there are independent researchers that are looking at Emilio intervention and how does that contribute to reentry outcomes and in-facility outcomes and ultimately recidivism rate. And so as we are seeing the volume of video calls go up, we're also seeing a reduction in in-prison misconduct, in particular violent misconduct. And that is actually something that we did not anticipate actually when we first rolled out, but the researchers picked up through administrative data from Iowa DOC that when people are connected with their loved ones, essentially they behave better inside facilities and they spend more time connecting and doing programs as opposed to essentially causing trouble. And so that was the first stage result that we're seeing from the research team. The second and the third stage are going to be reentry outcomes as well as recidivism rate. Iowa did just reported a decade-low recidivism rate last year. And so that would be the first cohort that we're utilizing Emilio. And so our internal platform also confirmed the data that Iowa DOC is seeing, that when people are connected with their loved ones, recidivism, 3-year recidivism does go down. And the rate of returning to facility after release also go down significantly. The last slide I want to show here is something that I always hear whenever we kind of talk to different states about the benefit of no-cost call. One concern that we always hear from the correctional officers is that drugs and misuse of communication goes up. So basically when calls become free, people started making calls to people they shouldn't be making calls, to, or accessing information that they shouldn't have access to. So we did ask the research team to take a specific look at if these unintended consequence goes up at all. And so from our findings, the misuse of communication actually went down during the no-cost call implementation period, and then drug-related offenses saw no change. And so obviously we're continuing to accessing administrative data from Iowa DOC, and we want to make sure that this is persistent across years. But from our first study based on just 10 years of their past administrative data, we're not seeing the kind of unintended consequences that many of our colleagues feared. That's really it. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully we'll have a lot of questions. But thank you all
Yeah.
for spending time.
Thank you so much. Can you send us those slides, please, if you haven't already? That would be very helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You can see them and posted that. Oh, evidently it's already happened.
I also sent the research paper. So yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. And maybe, so I just have a couple questions and I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll have questions. What is your revenue source?
Our
Pat,
revenue source. Yeah. Sorry. Our revenue source is pretty well split. So as a nonprofit, we do fundraise for philanthropic foundations. And then the other part of our revenue source is actually these state contracts. So when we actually do contract with the state, let's say Iowa, we do provide the services at a cost to the state. But essentially, it is essentially the cost of providing the calls and then storing the recording of those calls.
Okay, so that's a separate, so the inmates don't pay, but the state, I mean, somebody has to pay somehow.
Somebody has to pay. Yeah, exactly. So for Massachusetts, we're not yet providing services in the state DOC facilities, but we understand that the Commonwealth obviously allocates budget every single year to cover the service. We generally do it one of two ways. One is that there are states who already have budget for this because they had to pay the for-profit providers beforehand, and so they have budget to cover the services. For places where there is no budget, so example here will be Arizona Department of Juvenile Corrections, they literally have no budget to cover the service. We do work with the community foundation to start off the pilot and then fund the services there. So it is kind of a combination. Yeah.
All right, no, that's a good idea because the benefit would be in fewer costs to the state later.
Exactly.
But-
Yeah.
So, question for you. I mean, you're obviously providing, because you're a nonprofit, the service at a much reduced cost. Do you provide the service directly to inmates? In other words, if the state decided not to basically provide the service, could they contract with you to provide the service, but actually be funded through the inmate's use of the service?
So you mean like whether or not we can provide the service, but have the inmates pay for it? Or-
Correct. So basically,
Yeah.
you would be the provider. Right now, we contract with a provider to provide those services.
Yeah.
And they pay for the time. You obviously
Yeah.
provide that same service at a much reduced cost. So I'm just curious whether you provide that directly to some inmates in a state, or the only way that you would provide the services if it were contracted directly with a contract with the state.
So it's the latter. So we are very committed to not charging the inmates or the families. And so on our platform, there is actually no like place to process financial transactions at all. And so the only way that we can, based on the organization mission, is to provide these services with a contract with the state. So there is no place where end users can.
And then how do you do that? Do you have a set rate per month, or how do you actually come up with a cost?
Yeah, so I can give a little bit insight into our cost structure, but essentially the cost to Amelio mostly occurs in two ways. One is like if the state requires recording and the storage of these calls for a very long period of time, for us, that is where the vast majority of our costs come from, like to us. because, these are video calls that are pretty data intensive. And so to store them for, let's say, 5 years will take a lot of storage costs on our end. And then the second big category would be essentially training of the staff, right? So whenever you implement a new technology system, there's a lot of training going on. And so kind of the professional services on our end. For those two big chunks of the cost, we price it out at cost. So essentially whatever, the servers start charging us, like we basically pass that cost to the state. But those are the two big categories. The actual connecting a call is the cost to us is negligible. I mean, it's the same as like you and I are on a Zoom call and we're not paying for this call. And so that's yeah, that part is negligible. So for us, in terms of pricing it out, we just literally take a look at our operating expense on our cost side and then just pass it on to cost into a contract. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's just hard to how you come up with that initial cost because you don't know how many calls are going to be made or how much the data you're going to be required to
Storing.
store. So
I see. Okay, so let me put a finer point. So generally, when we do talk with a state or a Department of Corrections, if they have data on the past year's call volume, we do take that and do an estimation. So we'll ask them, right, like if they're making this up, like 3 million minutes happening in 2025, and if we're going to make calls free, we actually make the essentially we know empirically when calls do go free, volume goes up by 100 to 150%. And so we'll basically use that number to do an estimate of how many minutes of call will be there when calls are free. Then we'll ask them questions such as, is there a policy for you to store the call? If so, for how long? And if sometimes they don't have a policy, if they do, then we use the policy to estimate what's the total number of gigabytes essentially that we have to keep, right, for a duration of time. If they don't have a policy, we do across the 16 states that we already serve know the average. And so we'll just use the average to guess or to estimate the cost on our end.
thank you.
So it looks like you have a question, but I have so just a follow up. Do you have to record? Is that something that the agencies want you to record, or
Yeah,
you
it's
record?
yeah, so the recording is not up to us. And so usually the DOC will tell us what their internal policies are. I'm actually not sure about Vermont, but I know that for Massachusetts, for example, all the calls that are not privileged have to be recorded, but the storage component is a little different state by state. So for Massachusetts, I think the video calls are stored for 90 days only, but voice calls need to be stored for the duration of contract. And so that can be 5 years, right? That can be 10 years. Luckily, voice call does not take a lot of storage, even to store them. And then other states, like the ones that we serve in Illinois, have even more rigid storage requirements. Usually these are call recordings that correction officers pull afterwards for investigative purposes.
That makes sense.
But it is like mostly like we actually have no say over how long people store the calls.
So the customer decides it and you make your system work for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
We do try to sometimes share, like we'll share data, right, with the customer to help them inform the policy because again, this is the most costly aspect of service. And so we basically, we can pull data from our admin dashboard and say, hey, you said every single call needs to be stored for 5 years, but there's only once that you pulled a call in the past year that happened, after a year. So maybe you don't need to store it for 5 years, but we do share data basically with the Department of Corrections that we work with and say, what is the actual best use case here? Like, is it just it's just 1 year, or is it, can we do differential storage for different types of calls? But yeah, we share that with them, and ultimately it's for them to decide.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right, well, this has been very helpful, and I'm sure we know where to find you if we have more questions. And we can email and do all sorts of other ways to get in touch with you. But thank you very much. And I don't know if you guys talked about, so the bill, when you testified earlier, was more action oriented. What's in the bill now is a study and to get information. So just so that you know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you guys know where to reach me, and definitely
Yes.
let me know if you need any more information about Emilio, about, the agencies that we work with. But yeah, happy to provide any information. Thank you guys.
Thank you for your work.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. So did you all talk about the bill at all
Yeah.
before I was here? We haven't talked about it in a little bit. I wrote potential vote, but I'm up for getting more testimony before we vote, if that's the will of the committee.
You had said the corrections.
Yeah, they're not able to be here today, so they did send me some information, which basically I had asked. I was very briefly in the meeting yesterday, the Wi-Fi meeting with it, ADS. You
Oh,
were
yeah,
in most
yeah.
of that, I think.
I was not there.
Oh, darn. Okay. So we'll have to watch it. But I wanted to, in our, one of our conference meetings, Chair Emmett said that this information might be helpful to our, to the Wi-Fi
Right.
project. But, I posed that question to Haley, and the answer I got back was the Wi-Fi project will have no effect on any telecommunications that exist, free or not. Tablets and phone kiosks are on a separate network installed and operated by the contractor, which I would really like to know more about that. And then she continues, we would operationalize free calls by paying the bill to the vendor versus the population paying for them. There would be no infrastructure changes that I can envision. I still think it's worth it to understand other
Yeah, that
technical.
That sounds like be a separate, I'll just say network
Yes,
that the contractor can set up for
well,
inmate tel.
and the contractor is already setting that.
Yeah.
And I understand that there's issues with that network, so that's a different conversation than Wi-Fi conversation, possibly. So I would, unless y'all want to get stuff done quickly, I would prefer to get more testimony next week, because we'll have more than just a day next week.
Yeah, yeah.
You're gonna have to do it, yeah, quick, so
Well-
see if they're can be here on Tuesday.
Or if you're, I mean, I'm fine with the bill.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote yes on the bill regardless of that more.
It's really just a study.
Yeah,
It is.
I mean, I am as well.
All right, so then let's go ahead and do it. Okay. Senator Ingles, do you want to chime in on this?
No, but,
Okay.
so this is version 1.1.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's as we receive from the house, we can say that, yeah, first prospect. Okay, please call the roll.
Yes, Senator Benson. Yes. Senator Ingalls.
Yeah.
Senator Major.
Yes.
Senator Plumpton.
Yes.
Senator Harrison.
Yes. You, and then is there anybody who would like to report that? You would,
I'd like to do that.
This is my subject of our area of expertise.
You said it is or it's not?
It's not.
I'll.
Thank you. Senator Major. Okay,